So in my previous talk you saw that I was working on Mailbox now at the moment mainly, but in the past 3 years I was spending on this big project, and I really hope to be able to develop it into kind of 10 people personnel story, but it ran out of money. So, but it's still an ongoing project, and it's a very big project in Perl. There will not be much Perl code in this talk, but I will show you a little bit about the world. So I will speak about the positioning, what we're doing, why did I think that the world needs this, and so on, proofs, services, and so on. So let me introduce it a bit. I like to work for all kinds of funding projects, because if you work for a company, then you really have to do things that other people already did before you. And I always have ideas for things that people did not do before me. And I try to convince you that this is something really new. First I got some money from an LNet to work on it, and then from the NGI funding, that's the Next Generation Internet part of Horizon EU project. We have Horizon, then your Next Generation Internet, which is about 250 million per year EU subsidies. And one group I got involved with got 8.5 million for their project. And it started out as the OpenSearch Foundation, a mainly German foundation. And then they got that money, and then they started the OpenWebSearch.EU project. And you can see that there are really important names in there. And I was really a bit the odd one out, a self-employed, only master, not professor. So they gave me only 15 minutes talks and so on, very short slots, to try to explain them what they were doing and what open source was. Everyone we all know much better what we are doing than okay. I have to. It's recorded, is it? Oh. So what is OpenWebSearch doing? Well, actually, the OpenSearch Foundation. That's a very nice, very nice group, German foundation. And it has many different groups. The basic ideology is that they want to have a Google competitor in Europe. That's the ideology. But to get this done, there is a lot of complications. And the more interesting part, I think, of the whole group is the ethics and the legal part, especially with the GDPR and so on, and how they work. They have all kinds of projects to support that. Last week I heard the legal project, and they had a report of 150 pages, 2,000 paragraphs about different laws which had something to do with indexing text from web pages. So it's really difficult. They also do education, and they have all kinds of promotional material for secondary school and so on in German. Yeah. The other thing what they are doing is if you have an EU project, then besides the core members, and of these universities I mentioned, there are 4 core members, and they spend most of the money, but they also have to spend grants. So about 15% of their money must go to all kinds of grants from third parties. And I made myself in the position that I was one of those third parties. So I got a little bit of the money, and I'll show you what I did for that money. And the majority of activity they did was creating an index of web texts as first part for having a search engine. And well, it's about 3 billion URLs indexed. It's the whole data set is now about 1 petabyte, but it's only about 14 terabytes of text. The rest is all kind of logging and stuff. There's an American group, Common Crawl, and they have much more. They crawl every 2 months, about 350 terabytes uncompressed. It was also used, one of these, or 2 of these, so it's 2 monthly, 2 sets were used for a JTTP basis, next to Wikipedia and so on. So it's an open data set. So they have all these groups, and they are all in all conferences. They speak with all these groups, and they are very, it's very enthusiastic, let's say. Yeah. So what they built was something like this. This is you have the crawlers who collect web pages, text, and there's a WARC file format for this. You extract the text, put it in an index. But 4 years ago, I already informed them that the people who want to use it, in general, so research projects and so on in Europe, do not need such an index. They have very different needs. For instance, traditional search engine, you need a kind of text index. But for instance, GRC, that's the Joint Resource Center of the EU, they monitor media websites to sense what's the public opinion about certain subjects. Cybersecurity center where I worked for them, they crawl websites for whether they hear rumors about security issues. The Dutch National Library, KB, they have to collect data for the future. They have to collect websites from political parties and so on, because that's their official role. They have to record history for the future, you know. And but they all have very different demands in what do you want to do with the data you have crawled. So I think, and that were the main partners. I mean, DLR, the German Luft- und Raumfahrtgesellschaft, and CERN, they have a lot of data internally, and they say, I can't find it back on Google. So how can we publish it in our own systems? So that's so different. But they still just built a traditional system. But what I'm trying to push them a bit is into this kind of system where you have all these components, and you have crawlers, and you have people who extract useful data from it different ways and so on. And if you fragment it, then finally you get an understanding about license. Now they are fighting, what kind of license do we need on this data set, this central data set? But it's really impossible, because also all these purposes have different licenses, different permissions. Whether you're the National Library, where you have to store it for a long time, websites for political parties, it's totally different license than other cases where you are not allowed to keep it longer, because there may be personal data in it. So what really went wrong in this project, sorry OWS people if you look into it, but if you want to make one index with tens of petabytes and data later, in a later stage, then you need a strong central management, and that totally conflicts with open source. You cannot have strong management, and each of those components you are building is difficult. Everything is difficult, because all the time we are talking about petabytes of data which have to be moved and has to be licensed and so on. So each step requires special attention and special thinking about it. You cannot make one end product, you know. So it's far too complex. Anyway, so but if you have these all these components, if everyone is building pieces of it, then you would really like to have some kind of overview. You know, these projects, they work with each other, but they also have, because of regulations, a need to communicate with, for instance, the website owner. If you find illegal material on a website as one of these processes, you need to inform the website owner that you will take it down. If you extract, for instance, the location of a company from a website, in Germany you have the impression pages, you can just say, oh, this website has this location, then people must be able to correct this data. They have to see what you have extracted, and you have a right to correction. So sometimes you need a kind of front end for all these, to make a kind of cooperation, and that's the thing I liked. So I started with a project with Tao to help me. We tried to get into a big project to make this, and she was for getting the sponsoring, but it doesn't. Yeah, we tried 6 different fundings, and it's didn't work out. I went to a few conferences to speak about it and to try to get more involvement and so on, because you also really need users. And the nicest was, of course, COSCUP. That's kind of FOSDEM in Taiwan. So this is the list. So I had no time for Perl community, sorry. So Google has this. Google has Search Console, and now you can prove with Google that you own a website, and then you get all kinds of information from all the Google infrastructure about what it knows about your website. Google is everywhere. This gives them an enormous competitive advantage, because they can speak to the website owner. They say, oh yeah, you have links wrong on your web page, but at the same time, they know who you are, and they can sell you commercials, and they link it and so on. Very big advantage. So how will we build something which has the same features as Google Search Console, but then from a fragmented background? So some parties, the DLR, the Luft- and Raumfahrtgesellschaft, they had this project about extracting geographical information. You have the full index, you have all kinds of classifiers, attempts, at least research, you know, does a page or a website contain child porn, does it this, and so on, that kind of classifiers. How do they communicate with the world? Well, what seemed to be most difficult for me was to explain exactly what's new. Do you bring one box or another one? Ah. I will give you a 2-minute break to get it after there. So what's really difficult? People immediately, if I start to talk about giving access, then people immediately think, oh, it's about access. Yeah, but this is all kind of a kiosk site organizes this kind of access. That's not what I'm doing. Yeah, or you can think about things like Keycloak, where you have an organization and then you get access to all the applications which are behind one centralized username. No, it's the fragmentation. I try to unify all these background services, yeah, in one, and the background services are not related. Yeah, at home, I do have Keycloak access, and I do have this, but I still have a wiki with more than 300 different logins to all kinds of places. You know, and if you use Google stuff, then you once log in with your browser for Google, and then you have all their applications. You have access to all their applications at once. You don't have to register again. For our open source fragmentation, it will be very nice to have one place where you register, and then you can get easily into all these applications which take part. Yeah, so it's a very different level. And it never tried before. No one, for Google, it's pretty simple, much simpler than in a fragmented world. So many organizations, we have different backends with you have, of course, high privacy. The legal diversity is very difficult. So universities have very different legal needs for when you log in and so on. And so this is then the Google Search Console, but imagine the Google Search Console for things like the web search and maybe even blacklist removals, take down request sending and so on. And this is Open Console. Okay. So the problem is a bit, you make a central front end, and if you are not successful, that's always very easy. I mean, it's really nice to be not successful, but if you get users, then it's over. Especially when you get popular, it could get very fast popular, and then you cannot redevelop it on time. So I thought, if it will ever be successful, such front end, then I have to design it for big scale. You know, for all the more than 300 million website owners that they can just log in. Okay, I only scale in hardware, but not in the software development anymore. And it's so large in principle. So I created this system where you have websites, which is a cluster of websites, basically, clusters of databases for different kind of data, task cluster for batch processing, and a connection provider, which is also a cluster. So all kinds of clusters with different databases from the beginning in. Yeah, I've been busy. So, but I first thinking about what programming language should I use in this OpenWebSearch is university, so they all want Python. So I started to study Python a bit, and I thought, I can learn a language, but I can learn a language, but then I don't know the libraries. The libraries is most important of the language, you know. So finally, I decided to come back to my Perl, where I have all my libraries and where I really know how they work, and I know who to address to if something is broken and so on. So, and I love Modulicious as framework. You too? Who's Modulicious user? Who's using Dancer? Also a few, well, okay, about the same number. I really like it. For batch processing, I use Minion, which is also modulicious-based PostgreSQL. I use MongoDB for databases because I like object databases, but MongoDB has an issue. It's not supported anymore in the real way. 4.4, okay, later. That's not the only issue. And so on, my log report, and NetDNS, oh, that's also such a good module, such a core module for internet. Oh, sorry, and then some weird things, Bootstrap. I do like Bootstrap, cascading style sheet, JavaScript, and so on. Okay, yeah. Furthermore, I made a decision to develop it for minimum client-server interaction. So sometimes I produce long pages in one go, where all kinds of parts will be enabled or disabled and so on, as long as possible. So that's totally anti-hype, where if you go to GitHub, every change you make is immediately visible everywhere into the backend and so on. But otherwise, I cannot make it work in open source community. I need too many resources, just far too many resources. Okay, so Pro 5, Pro 5 is just much fast enough, really. Yeah, I thought Raku, I doubt, no, Raku is not fast enough as far as I know. Many was, okay, many owns. Okay. So, although I told the people from OpenWebSearch that's their project, of course it's a global project. You can use it for all kinds of interfaces where you need some registration in the open space. What do you create? Registration. This looks like a normal app. Yeah, here's I kind of tabs. I don't know. This is probably not the final design, graphical design, but I have pages and sub-pages and so on. I like folded forms where you don't have to scroll through too long, and this also makes it more dynamic. Yeah, sign in. And then if you are signed in, then you get into a kind of interface where you have, you can select which kind of backends, which backend you want to go to. But you can also have a login button on that application website, and then use like OpenID, log in via OpenConsole. Yeah, okay, this is the standard part, you know, this is making a login. Yeah. But compared to what Google is doing, here you have the Google Search Console. Oh, all my knowledge is in here. Yeah, and here it's clear what my knowledge is. And these are their features. Well, you select the features over there. So, but the more I worked on it, the more I thought I saw that if you want to integrate it, then we should really change our idea about login. Our whole process of getting, as a user, getting towards a service. There's so much overlap. All these 300 registrations I have on my wiki, I have to prove my email address again. I have to have my address in there somewhere, language configuration and so on. And actually, it is so primitive how we work with services on the internet. Can we not, it is meanwhile, just improve this a bit. So you have a lot of applications on the internet, and I want to have access to it. So you can register everywhere separately. Or if you have the services which belong together in some way or the other, you can use some keycloak thing with a single sign-on service for some part. Or you can ask Google to do you a single sign-on. Yeah. But then you get this OpenID Connect data. I don't know whether you have ever seen it, but OpenID Connect gives you the avatar for your picture and name and address and language. It is pretty primitive, and you still need to do something at the application side. For instance, you still have to do confirm for terms and conditions and license and so on. So this whole process with this OpenID Connect is okay, a bit of improvement for single sign-on, but then worldwide, but it's still pretty limited. And do you trust Google? And they know that you go to that website, and they get information back from that website what you're doing there. So I don't think you should trust it. Then you have some grouping. This is B2Access from in European way, and you see you can log in via Facebook, GitHub, Google, and so on, and get kind of single ID. Which one is open source in our space, in our open source community? Which of those? None. Yeah, none of those. The few are in the academic space. What's there's none single sign-on or so feature in our open space. Why not? Because you need a lot of resources. So the current possibilities, the connection between this registration and logging in, they are really primitive. You know, for instance, if I look at my personal thing. Okay. I have different roles in society, and I want to split them in different identities. Yeah, whether I'm a Perl developer or a home role and so on. And I have different configurations, different email addresses for them, and how I want to be addressed and what language I speak. Then I want to have some way to share accounts without sharing a password, but just say I invite a few colleagues to do something together. I want to be able to manage exactly which facts are being shared to which each of these services. You know? And there are additional things which we need in all registrations, which are in none of the existing protocols. Yeah? So this is what OpenID gives you, some given name and nickname and okay. And what I especially want is more and more you need extra information with your serious internet use. For instance, the proof that you own a website. And I don't want you to prove it each time again for every application, but you have a single place where you can do the proof. And then this proof is shared with all the places who need to know that you own that website. There are quite a lot of things, postal address and so on, what we could share in the future, so you don't have to register it all over again all the time. But in the moment, I only implemented email addresses and website proof. But that's the beginning. So this is the whole picture. So you have the application and the user, but there are some things missing here, and there are some things missing here. So let's first go to the first part. So you can create identities. So you have the accounts with some information. Then you have identities where you can say, okay, for this role, I use a different full name or a different nickname and so on. Then you can have groups, and if you start a group, you can invite people, you get nice emails sending out and so on. And so a group of colleagues. And you can easily move your personality, identity to groups. Okay. And at the end, the backside, so we have these proofs. This is an example how you can add a proof for an email address to your email address. Well, everyone has seen this before. You know, verify, and then you get an email, and then you have to click on the link and so on. But the nice thing is, well, all these services will share that proof if they need to know it. You get overview, and you can even have different kinds of proofs. And they can have a value. The higher score they get, the better your proof is. That's also very different from other identity providers. Usually identity providers say, okay, I want to give only 100% proofs, but I want to support also partial proofs or even claims. You claim you have it, and so on. So there's different levels. And you can, these proofs, so I approved this email address, but I can just drag it into one of my other identities if I want to. Websites. So there are different website address proofs. First you have to prove that to check the website, and even all these steps, if you implement it simple, then it's just a few lines of one euro call. But for instance, if you want to do a really good implementation, just checking whether a website URL is correct are about 80 tests already. Yeah, and here you can see a bit of a trace, DNS checks and so on. Yeah. Okay, no time for really looking at all the complications you have, but and then there are different. I implemented different kinds of proofs. It could have a different score, how good the proof is, via DNS. So add something aligned to a DNS table, or adding a block to your website front page, or a file, adding a file in the well-known directory. So different kinds of ways to prove it, and have one implementation, and everyone after that can see that proof. Okay, so okay, this is how it works. You have an account, personal identity, or groups, and okay. So then we want to speak with the service, and your personal identity or your group, where your working group, they can establish a contract with the service you want to use. So let's say here I have the guy from OpenWebSearch project, and he has a group OpenWebSearch, and in its group he defines a service, and this service gives access to their front terminal where you can see how they crawled, what they crawled. Then I want, as a user, I want to, for instance, connect it to it to do a takedown request. This is how you define a service. Okay. If you define a service, you can exactly say this kind of information I want to have from the user. Yeah, and you can even specify why you want to have this information. So the service defines what he wants to have, and it's to the user to give that information, and he sees what the user knows what kind of data will be transported. Yeah, I want to have email addresses or websites even. Okay, so on that side you have this service always defined by a group, because you have at least one manager, but later maybe multiple managers, or the manager will change, so you can hand the service registration somewhere. On the other hand, you have these, an account, and within an identity, I can start a contract for that service. So the first time that I go to a service, I say via login button, for instance, on the website of that service, I come into Open Console. Then I will go to the page where you have to sign a contract. That's exactly what you do now. Only the difference is the contract negotiation for logging in is now in this Open Console, open interface, and not at the user, at the end user, the service provider. So there's one implementation, and I hope you trust the one implementation more. So you get a kind of, so you sign a contract for that service, explains what the service is, and that's your terms and conditions and so on from the provider. So that's now in the registration process, not at the provider, the service provider anymore, but it's in the central system. Which term and condition did you really sign? Yeah. And then you sign it, and on the moment that you sign the contract, you can also see what kind of data will be shared. If you want to see it, you can exactly see what is being shared. Okay, so on the moment, so that's the first step, the connection. And then on the moment that you're going to use it, you get some OAuth 2. Everyone knows how this works, you know. So if you look and push the button on their website, then the system, the login service, the OID, OpenID service wants to see whether you have a valid contract. Otherwise, you have to go to the contract page first. And then you have to comply. Before you go in, you have to give the data he wants to have. And then you get the data is exchanged via kind of OAuth back channel. Yeah, you all know, you all implemented this before. It's a horror to implement. So this is the comply page. So you have this after the registration. Once you have to at least to specify what kind of information you really want to give out, and you get all the different choices if there are alternatives. Yeah, and so you can really see what is being shared, and then so looks complex. Implementation-wise, it's complex, but if you use it, it's not different than what you're used to now. But the data is stored in a different place. The place where you agree with the service is now open and not at the service provider anymore. And you get much more data than OpenID Connect, where you got only family name and so on, but you get very much more details and the proofs. So the proof that the email address is correct and so. So it's built for a huge scale. So what we now saw was mainly the website part, and so the accounts and the identities and the groups. And then you have to show the tasks, the proof for the DNS checks and so on. They take too much time. So you cannot do that in the web servers. You have to do it in a separate daemon. And in the connect, so the login process, I decoupled it as much as possible from the website, so that usually when you log in, you press the login button, it will not go to the web services. 10 minutes, so much, that's much. So, and each of these are clusters of systems. So, I would say try it. So I got time for questions. So I can explain a little bit more. So these are, for instance, now MongoDB databases. That's a nice question. I'm really interested. How many of you are doing preferably SQL and who is object-oriented? So SQL databases and object databases. Oh, object databases are so much easier. Really much easier. Okay. Okay, so this is that was what I wanted to tell you about Open Console. So pure Perl, everything is Perl, and I have a few spin-off projects as well, and I will speak about one of those in the lightning talks as well. But yeah, Salve.
Yeah, awesome. I really hope this can be used sometimes, but and go somewhere. Best of luck with that. One question though, I saw that you mentioned just a moment ago about data sharing in the back end. And to me that says, there might be some GDPR implications here. Do you have any thoughts around that in here? Because if we start using this, we'll have to still follow that law.
You see the data sharing, because the data sharing is extremely explicit. Here, you can see this. You can see exactly this grant, as we call it, which is exchanged over the backend, is just you. You can modify it, you can see the data, and of course the service will not keep that data itself. But that's still the same trust issue. How do they keep the data? But it's much clearer than in OpenID, for instance, where they exchange this. But then in the backend, the OpenID Connect also give all kinds of Google extensions and so on, so they can exchange more data than this. And you cannot see that because it's only in the backend, in the back channel. So,
Max.
How can if I run an app or a website, how can I integrate sign in with Open Console? Is that, I need to do something, right?
Yeah, you need to do something. So there's a Perl module in preparation, which is offering about 5 different calls. And one is to set up, for instance, the parameters you need for this login button on the website. What do you need? So let's say, let's describe the whole process. You have your application, and for each of the clones, each of the servers you run this on, you log in to Open Console. That's just like OAuth is doing. And then you get from Open Console, your application gets a kind of key, a session key, which it can use. And that session key is used in the button, which is on your website. So you have to integrate that. And on the moment that the user is clicking on the button, he's redirected to, and so on. So there are about a few small steps. That's the same as OpenID Connect steps, let's say. But then you get into this issue that everyone is using different frameworks and so on. So I now have this module for Modulicious, and well documented, and then I hope that other people will convert it to Dancer or to the other systems. There is for the OAuth, there is one thing you have to do, but in some cases you can avoid it, but there is a requirement for a kind of unique key what the server side is, the service side is collecting and checking as well. So you might need to have a database on your own site as well. You cannot totally do it without database on your site. That's a good security measurement. To repeat. Who's going to implement the Dancer 2 version of the? Okay. Max has another question.
If nobody else has a question. One of the data you offered to send was my date of birth, but nobody really needs my date of birth. They only need to know if I'm over 18 or not. Is that, or in general, zero knowledge proofs in that way, or reduced proofs?
Yeah, well, one of the things is that I have at the moment not an implementation for proof of date of birth. The issue with all these infrastructures is that you have to do 95% of the real complex work before you can do the 5%, which is the useful part. And the useful part is date of birth and so on. But that's totally true. So you configure your age, but on the other hand, the provider gets a silly check. There are so many ideas I have in this space, but you're totally right.
Can you explain something more about the identity, so I can create anonymous identities for going to webshop X or porn site B?
There are two things. There's only one you. But the identities, in my opinion, are the different roles you play in life. So are your things. So it's your organizational information. So it's for this work identity. I have use my formal name, and I use my formal picture, and so on. And so if you create a contract, and it's for what identity do I use this contract most, and then the defaults for this filling in is from that identity. You can still take other values, but the defaults are taken from identity. But also the identities are used for organizing. Your email address belongs to one of your identities, and it might be that you approve an email address for your group. That's also possible. And then if you connect, because I didn't show that here, but of course you can also, one of your groups can have a contract with the service providers. And then you can add, for instance, your website proof to a group where you're a member to everyone who's maintaining their website can use the same. And that's one of the things which is now totally broken as far as I have seen in real life. That if you are managers with a group of people, you manage some kind of service which relates to your website, for instance, in a kind of verifying whether your website is up. Every minute you have those services, then you have to share passwords and so on, and there's not a real thing for that. But OpenConsole has this really as first-class citizens, let's say. Yeah, Herbert.
Thank you. This seems like a big project. Are you the only one who's implementing that for the whole EU? I mean, there are so many companies or organizations involved, and you do the implementation or what?
Yeah, I like the program. But I had hoped to have a team of people to be able to support it, and especially, and so I had to hope that I had 10 people by now or something, but that didn't work out. There is a change. The NGI, so that is the EU funding, and then the Horizon and the NGI. The NGI is being stopped totally as it is now, and there will be a follow-up system where it's less on research and more on open infrastructures. So once that kicks off, then I have a bigger chance to get money. This is not a robot, it's not AI. So, and meanwhile, I continue to building this, and then it's now it gets into this final stages where it is really showable. Then I hope I can make people better understand what I'm doing, why it's different than before, when you only have to speak in abstract terms and 15-minute talks. So, yeah, clear? Okay, that's it.